All right, welcome to a quick tutorial on functions. So, first of all, just a reminder: one of the key purposes of functions is that functions can reduce code complexity and code repetition. So, for example, I created this code that prints this pretty border around text. Instead of just "Hello World," I wanted a box that said "Star Hello World," and then I wanted a box around the next thing. And you can see here, I had to count the number of characters here and then multiply to get the stars on top and the bottom. And you can imagine if I did these things a lot, this would get to be pretty tedious, that I need, basically 3 print statements for everything I want to print out in my game. Never mind if I decided I wanted to make it fancier, if I wanted to limit the width or something like that. So here's a way to implement that same thing with functions, which is much nicer. So now I say I'm going to create a pretty print function, and it's going to have a single argument. In this case, the text that comes in. And then based on that argument, I'm going to print a box of stars around whatever text I get. So luckily, Python makes it super easy to multiply strings. It also has this length function, which lets me get the length of the text. So I take the length of the text, I add 4, because I'm going to have these stars and a space on each side. And then I'm going to print the text itself with the stars around it, and then the same thing again. And here's a test, or here's 3 of the print statements right there. If I go to my shell, let's Python function.py. There we go. Hello world. We're going to play a number game. This is a lovely number game to play, I think. And that looks pretty nice. Let's say that I wanted a vertical space in addition. That would be super easy to do. I could say print star plus space times length of text plus 2 plus star. That's going to create, I just changed the function. Now instead of having to change my code in like 6 places, I can just change it in 1. Oopsie daisies, I made a mistake. I forgot my parentheses there again. If I'd made that mistake, if I'd copied and pasted the code, I would have to fix that mistake 3 times. Instead, I only have to fix it once. And there, now I have the space there. Now, let's say that I decided sometimes I wanted different characters than a star. I could create a new argument called starChar. And in my code, I can just replace each star with the starChar. And now I can make variants of the box that use pluses, stars, or squiggles. Oops, you can see I forgot one of them. That's why it's worth testing. So I hope this quick demonstration shows you what's kind of neat about functions is that you can quickly not only save repetition, but make variation easier by saying what things could be arguments. You can make it easier to vary your function. I could also add a padding value. So those places where I added the spacing, this could be a number, and I could say for n in padding and for n in, for n in range padding. So now what I'm going to do is make it so that that can be 1 space, or it could be more. Now I'm going to multiply the space by that padding. All right. Now I'm going to add the padding value. So let's try it with, actually let's go in order 1, 2, 3, or let's try 0, 1, 2. See how that works? There we go. So there it is with 0 spaces. There it is with 1. There it is 2. Looks like I got 1 element off there. Looks like I multiplied. But again, it's super easy to go back to my code and see where I made the mistake. Here's the mistake. I've got the 4 hard-coded in, so I want to say +2 plus padding times 2. +2 plus padding times 2. See if that fixes that up. Ooh, looks like I made it worse. Oh well, I can figure it out eventually. I probably forgot to do it here. Yep. Padding times 2. And there it is. Now, I have a very nice function where I can change the characters, I can change the spacers, and so on and so forth. One other handy thing in Python, you can set default arguments by adding equal here. So if I say padding equals 1 is the default and *char equals star is the default, I can then call the function with just 1 argument. Oopsie daisies, looks like I did something wrong. Oops, I made padding into I forgot to make it an integer. There we go. So now the default is this single space hello world star. And if I want to specify the characters, I can, but I don't have to. So, and I can change it to be anything I want. Oops. There we go. There it is with slashes and stars and whatnot. And I'm starting to get a nicer looking text game. Okay, so that's a nice way to create a function. These 3 functions all, we didn't worry about the return value. So we would say that their argument is the text. And then now I've created 2 optional arguments that are the star character and the padding. And their return value is none. And I can show you that by, if I set this thing to x equals print return value is x. Go ahead and add that return value is none. So by default, functions return nothing if you don't tell them to return something. And that's because pretty print is meant to do something. It prints on the screen, but it's not meant to give the programmer a value they can work with. On the other hand, let's say I were creating a guess my number game, which I'm actually doing. In that case, I might want to create a function that gets a number from the user. So I can go ahead and create a function called getNumber, and maybe that takes a minimum and a maximum. And it's going to then ask the user for a number. So n equals raw input, please enter a number. And then it's going to return the integer of n, which is to say the number. Oops, I forgot to say. Please enter a number between min and max. I'm going to use some string formatting. And lovely, there it is, return integer. So now I could say pretty print. We're going to play a number game. And then I could say n equals get number. Print print the user entered n. All right, let's see how that works. Whoopsie daisies, I forgot to call it with a min and a max. Lovely. Please enter between 1 and 10. 5, the user entered 5. That looks pretty nice. We'll notice I can change the min and the max and it changes what's printed. That works pretty nicely. Great. Now, inside of this function, I might do some error checking. So instead of just getting the number, I could say n equals int of n, and then I might check if n is less than min, n is greater than min, pretty print please enter a number between the values I gave you. And I can give it a little character there. And now I can say return get number min max. So it's going to call the function again. This is a fancy feature I called recursion. I call the function within the function. So if the number's wrong, we're just going to call ourselves again and ask for the number one more time until they give it to us. All right, let's try this again. Python function. Play a number game. Please enter from 100. Let's try entering a wrong number, 150. Please enter a number between the values I gave you. Please enter between 1 and 100. Okay, fine. Negative 100. Oh, it's so mad at me. Fine, I'll give it 50. And it looks like I made a mistake. If n is less than min, or n is greater than min, look at that. This is only going to get out if I give it 1. Greater than max. Made a typo. Always worth testing your code. Let's run this again. 20, and we're done. The user entered 20. All right, so now get number has this return statement, and the return statement returns a value, and that means it can be useful. We've used some other functions that return values, such as the text function, and the len function, the length function, returns a value. The integer function returns a value. So lots of functions return values, and you can in fact then compose functions, which is to say you can put more than one together. So for example, you could say pretty print the user entered plus string of get number of 1 to 100. If we don't want to save it in a variable, we just want to enter it. I can comment out all that other code and run this. It's going to, before it can do the, it's going to call from the inside out. So we read from left to right, but computers execute from inside out. So watch this. I run the code. It comes to the bottom. It calls pretty print. The user entered now. Before it can get the parameters for pretty print, it has to run string. Before it can run string, it's got to run get number. So the first thing it does is it runs get number. Please enter a number between 1 and 100. Let's say I enter an incorrect number. Okay. If I enter an incorrect number, n is greater than max, it prints please enter a number between the values I gave you. Just did that. And then it calls get number again. So now we're inside of get number a second time. Try another incorrect. Still angry. Now let me try a number 25. And now it finally has 25. It feeds that to string and gets a string. It puts these together and gets the string the user entered 25. And then it feeds that to my pretty print function. And we have the pretty print of the user entered 25. So that's how you compose functions. You can put them together like this for compactness in your code. It's worth remembering that code usually runs backwards and inside out. So we define all our functions up top, but the execution starts when we actually start calling functions at the bottom here. Pretty print is the first thing Python actually does. And then once we're inside, if we've composed functions, it's going to be the inside function that gets run first. So get number is run, then string is run, and then pretty print is run. So functions can be pretty confusing. They go backwards from how you think, but they also can be pretty hugely powerful. As I think you saw with that pretty print function, you can save yourself a lot of code repetition, and you can introduce a great deal of flexibility and power when you use functions wisely.